America. Included among them were my two-time great-grandparents, Michael Kern and Ann Flaherty, and their children. Catholic priests from the various parishes in western County Galway and southern County Mayo had selected the most destitute families and accompanied them to the city on the 11th day of June, 1880. The families were some of the poorest inhabitants of the Connemara region of Ireland. Some of the families had even been evicted from their home the day before. By 1880, the western area of County Galway had been devastated by crop failures. Continual rains sapped the nutrients from what little fertile soil existed there. Economic activity ground to a halt. Evictions spiked and hunger ravaged the area. The social reformer Father James Nugent from Liverpool, England, had spent the previous months investigating the unfolding crisis and distributing relief to the poorest inhabitants. Earlier that year, Father Nugent contacted his friend and colleague, Bishop John Ireland of the Diocese of St. Paul. Bishop Ireland was head of the Irish Catholic Colonization Association. He had successfully established numerous immigrant colonies in Minnesota by arranging with the railroads to make land available to the newcomers. The two clergymen joined forces and sponsored the immigration of those more than 30 families in June of 1880. The immigrants landed in Boston on June 22nd, just 11 days after setting sail from Galway Bay. They boarded a train to the west, finally ending up on the plains of western Minnesota near the small community of Graceville in Big Stone County. The plan was to give each family the opportunity to acquire 160 acres of farmland, which Bishop Ireland had arranged from the railroad companies. Prior to the settlers' arrival in Graceville area, each of the families had 5 acres broken for seeding. A small wood frame home was partially built for them. Seed, farming implements, a cow, and other provisions were provided to them. So what possibly could go wrong? Unfortunately, the project was not successful. A number of factors worked against the newly arrived settlers. They had no experience farming 160 acres of land. In Ireland, they farmed 3 to 5 acre plots of land on rock-strewn soil. The Minnesota climate and landscape was completely foreign to them. Ireland was temperate and rainy throughout the year. Minnesota experienced temperature extremes in the winter and the summer. Finally, they arrived too late in the year to plant their crops. Then, the Minnesota winter of 1880 to 1881 was one of the coldest on record. Snow started falling in October and lasted until the spring. Multiple feet blanketed the ground. The immigrants starved and froze that winter. The Catholic Church and the neighboring communities tried to help them, but the challenges were just too great. Bishop Ireland finally pulled the plug on the project and released the settlers from their obligations to purchase the land. The rest settled here, or some families stayed behind in Graceville and successfully farmed the land. The rest of them came here in the area where various railroad lines converge and where Phalen Creek empties into the Mississippi River, this lovely area here. Here they lived in poorly constructed homes, haphazardly arranged on the Phalen Creek floodplain near the railroad tracks just below Dayton's Bluff. They found jobs with the railroad and in other industries in the area. Many women became domestics in the homes of the wealthy and in the large hotels in the nearby Central Business District. They preserved their native Irish language, their Catholic faith, and engaged in traditional crafts such as making lace. But life was really hard and very dangerous. Early one morning, of May of 1883, my 2 times great-grandfather, Michael Kern, left his small, poorly constructed shelter that sat near the railroad tracks just a short distance from here under the iron 7th Street Bridge, and the house which sheltered his wife and his 4 children. He set out that morning to gather wood for the morning fire. Little bits of railroad ties on the tracks, other combustible material. While standing there on a switch track, observing a train traveling in the opposite direction, he failed to hear the freight train that was coming from behind. The train struck Michael from behind, pulled him under the 2 front cars. In the words of the newspaper of the time, the vivid prose of those newspapers at that time said he was horribly mangled and must have been killed instantly. His son, Stephen, my great-grandfather, stood before a judge a week later to answer charges for disturbing of the peace, something that happened very often there, and said that if he was incarcerated, his poor mother and siblings would be houseless and homeless. Another young man by the name of Edward Burke, a member of one of the families that came to Graceville, lost a leg in a run-in with a streetcar. He and his family ended up returning to Ireland, and they spent the rest of their lives there. He would go on to become a famous Irish storyteller, Eamon a Burke, one of the most famous Irish storytellers during the 20th century. And one of his quotes adorns our sign. Most of the original families of Connemara Patch eventually bettered themselves economically and left the area for better opportunities in the later years of the 19th century and the 20th century. My family left St. Paul in the late 1880s for opportunities opening up in the state of Washington. There in the Pacific Northwest, they settled in, became American citizens, and prospered as laborers in the newly established industries of the area. So, after a short musical interlude by the Connemara Patch, my cousin and fellow Connemara Patch descendant, Leslie Thomas, will talk about the next wave of immigrants that came into the Connemara Patch. And they were the settlers sponsored by James Hack Tuke.